Welcome classic rock fans to an episode of Classic Album Review, where classic albums are excavated and explored. And today we're looking at Excitable Boy by Warren Zevon. Rudyard Kipling famously said that life is brief, but in its brevity it offers us some splendid moments. And I can't help but feel that this album is one of those splendid moments which will live in the memory long after the final note has ceased to resonate. This album is full of wry and ironic observations that recognises that in order to embrace humanity, we have to be able to reconcile the glory and the scum that lies in every human heart. It's a remarkable collection of songs filled with macabre imagery and what one critic has described as a manic self-indulgence, all delivered, of course, with that exquisite, laconic sneer of his. But it's the pith, the irony, and the dark humour that recommends this album to me. It's absolute delight. I adore the big single off this. When I say big single, because it's a song that I immediately recognised when I heard it, Werewolves of London. However, when I think of that song, I'm instantly reminded of the song off the last Paul Simon album called Werewolf. Although with the Paul Simon number, those lycanthropic howls were fashioned on a guitar. However, Zevon's Werewolf songs are a hilarious mix of high fashion and a rabid bloodlust. A song dismissed later as just a joke or a dumb song for smart people. Part of the appeal for me in these songs is Zevon's curious phrasing. Unlike Dylan, he's not too wordy or too opaque. But like Dylan, he employs some exquisite melodic phrases and standout lines. But Zevon actually has the voice to carry these, filled with these inflected nuances. When we think of art and the importance of art, I'm reminded of a quote by Goethe who said that letters are among the most significant memorial a person can leave behind them. And this collection of songs, this body of work, in fact, is a befitting memorial for a man whose life was snuffed out way, way too soon. There are lots of textures on this album that the listener can positively revel in, from the howling choruses in that silly song once more about a man with admiration for fine clothes and all these other sort of knickknacks. The brilliant ironic dissonance of the title track, not to mention the exquisite guitar and piano work on Accidentally Like a Martyr. And Zevon's public battle with cancer understandably endeared him to us. I think when confronted with mortality, even if it's not our own, our hearts tend to go out. But it's rather ironic, really, that this wave of sentiment should be ushered towards an artist who at times could be brutally unsentimental. For many, he's seen as a problematic artist. For my wife as well, who cannot believe that there's any pleasure to be taken from a man who sings about rape and murder. It seems that some people can't often see beyond the darkness of the subject matter. However, I'm rather fond of what I would describe as a gallows humour. That blend of Dylan-esque sneer, the melodicism and poeticism of Paul Simon, not to mention the droning wordsmithery of Leonard Cohen. Leonard Zevon's music and songs seem to be an amalgam of all these influences. It's an engaging and eclectic album. We get that disco-fied funk of Nighttime in the Switching Yard. Vera Cruz, a number pregnant with political positioning, indicting, of course, US imperialism certainly as a subtext there, I guess. Tenderness on the Block espouses, paradoxically, I have to say, world-weary optimism, contained in the oxymoronic compound adjectives of wide-eyed and streetwise. And then we get Lawyers, Guns and Money, which almost seems like a blueprint for much of that early Nick Cave stuff. Robert Christgau said that the 4 songs on this album that deal with male psychosis by mock celebration are absolutely positively addictive, and he's certainly not wrong. And that's part of the appeal of this album, as it just, I think, crosses lines and pushes boundaries in terms of its subject matter. This is the follow-up to the self-titled debut album. With Excitable Boy, we get that same sardonic, sharp style and dark lyrics. I have to say the whole thing bristles with edginess. Maybe not so much the musical form, but certainly the lyrical themes. Excellent melodies that provide a platform for these quirky, yet emotionally stirring stories. And Zevon has a really interesting musical background as well, from studying Igor Stravinsky to becoming a folk singer, to writing songs for the Turtles, to even being a piano player for the Everly Brothers. And let's not forget this album comes with a whole plethora of classic rock luminaries. Jackson Browne was very much involved with this. You had John McVie and Mick Fleetwood playing during what one critic describes their peak post-Tusk cocaine delirium, and Linda Ronstadt provides vocals on this one as well. There's no doubt that he was an artist that was certainly admired, and the lyrical song structures on this album are really a thing of beauty, with Zevon fluctuating between the bizarrely metaphorical to the uncompromisingly macabre, and he does so effortlessly as well, which has to be a worry. But I think the song that best showcases his flexibility is the wonderful Lawyers, Guns and Money. It's a perfect vehicle to critique foreign politics and upper-class stereotypes. It's a number, of course, about a roguish young man who I think gets on the wrong side of the Russian mafia. Never a good idea. But it's a song, like many on this album, that's delivered with a rueful smile and a tongue placed firmly in cheek. But the music is also worthy of scrutiny. We get the gritty tone of the lyrics are embellished with an enhanced rock edge. The title track is Randy Newman on amphetamines. You get Vera Cruz, which certainly would not have been seen out of place during what I call Dylan's Desire period. And the performances are nuanced and tight, wonderful melodic flourishes throughout. And one critic has quite rightly said, replete with those smooth Steinman-like accents, particularly on Accidentally Like a Martyr. And that's before we get that distinctive Doobie Brothers vibe on Nighttime in the Switching Yard. It's a veritable feast of impressions, literate, darkly humorous stories enveloped by this wonderful, wonderful music. And this album is replete with these interesting narratives and character types, from the predatory ladies' man to the vengeance-seeking vigilante, the anti-hero to the homicidal sociopath. It seems to me that there's definitely something for everybody on here. Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner is a bit of a mouthful, I must say. Is a real gem. It's a murder ballad, no doubt, that operates within the paradigms of that classic outlaw ghost story. The highwayman came riding up to the old inn door, wrote Alfred Noyes. Just one of many poems and songs just like this. What's his name? Washington Irving, another one who springs to mind. But on this album we see Zevon penning what I would call cohesive narratives, a product of maturity, no doubt, and probably no doubt by clearer focus once he sort of gave up the booze. Songs of his early period have been described by Jackson Browne as the poetico-shemetico period, whereas the later numbers are his berserko period. Not really sure what Jackson Browne is alluding to here, but quite interesting terminology is used. But it's on this album we see that glorious collision of personal revenge narratives, strange fantasies and foreign politics all thrashing themselves out deliciously for the listener. Vera Cruz evokes the Woodrow Wilson era, his invasion of the country and subsequent loss of both life and social pride. Roland, of course, is another political one. On the previous album, there was a song called Muhammad's Radio. It was a gospel-charged number filled with worry and woe. It's just interesting to see how his songwriting style evolves from that album to this one. I must admit the title track absolutely intrigues me. I've done a reaction video to this song, which is on my higher tier Patreon if you want to check that out. We get lots of wonderful musical flourishes. He certainly has... almost like he has Little Richard at his fingertips. Strong saxophone, of course, by Jim Horn has to be noted. I mean, during this period there seems to be this desire for embedding these strong saxophone solos and flourishes in these songs. On Baker Street, of course, the saxophonist was Raphael Ravenscott, rest in peace, who played on that one. And Bob Seger's Turn the Page off that live album also has a wonderful, wonderful sax moment, shall we say. But on Excitable Boy we get these very syrupy voices as well. Linda Ronstadt contributes backing vocals on this one. These honeyed voices, which are quite interesting in terms of being juxtaposed with the context or the lyrical theme of the number. They provide a very strange platform for this very dark narrative. Our titular character's heinous acts, of course, unfold before us. Nevertheless, the music remains bouncy and upbeat, dissonant, and deliciously dark. Interestingly, of course, the inverse is actually achieved on Tenderness on the Block. This album is not just steeped in piano balladry, but it actually employs some really interesting musical array of tones and textures. And his ability to write really impressive hooks is worth mentioning here. He manages to achieve, I think, more mainstream success than the very moribund Nick Cave, the goth Sinatra, as Rolling Stone calls them, or even Tom Waits for that matter. And part of that has to be his ability to write great music, and again, those aforementioned catchy hooks. You know, we get these arty indulgence, blended literary allusions, dark humour, and just the sheer rock and roll of it all. I think what Zevon achieves with these songs is to take us beyond the threshold of the normal or the decent, as well as managing to maintain an innate romanticism in his lyrics. You know, we get a song like Werewolf with that stream of consciousness style, to the dramatic breakup ballad of Accidentally Like a Martyr with its very Dylan-esque title. All these numbers, the subject matters and the delivery, make them absolutely timeless. Anyway, let's talk about the songs on this album one by one. The first number, Johnny Strikes Up the Band, Zevon sings Freddie Get Ready, Rock Steady when Johnny strikes up the band. Some have suggested this is a song about a drug dealer, but I think it's more about Johnny Carson and his longtime producer, Freddie D. Cordova. I hope I've said that correctly. It's an upbeat number set amid the glamour, if you can call it that, of the late night TV show. And of course, the album goes on from here to spin these very dark narratives. The album seems to be attempting to frame the American experience in a series of tales and motifs. This song also has very much a Tom Petty vibe to me. I don't know if anyone else agrees with me on that one. Oh yes, and of course a bit of cowbell never hurt anybody. Werewolf London is an exquisite number, described by one writer as a melding of the classy and the tacky. It's a stream of consciousness narrative and a piece of debauched Victoriana. The song, like the title track, has this upbeat energy, this jubilance, again creating that ironic dissonance and distancing between the tone of the song and the dark subject matter. Zevon does this beautifully, and it's what gives his stuff a unique edge. This dark humour is very distinctive and seems to run through his music. On this song he evokes the image of the Queen and Lon Chaney strolling around London, some hairy creatures eating Chinese food as well as mutilating old ladies. There's no doubt that one critic has described this song as infused with a gleeful dementia, perfectly emblazoning the sophisticated violence of this album. I read somewhere that originally this number was penned for the Everly Brothers. I can't quite see them doing this somehow. It's a bouncy number with these very casual interjections, almost Tarantino-esque depictions of violence. You better get away from him, he'll rip your lungs out, is one of the lines from it. Glorious, glorious stuff. Excitable Boy is a song that I've spoken about at length already. Do check out that reaction video. You know, it's similar dark thematic territory we've already seen. Jaunty, upbeat number with beautiful backing vocals by Linda Ronstadt. You know, ironically, the way this song deals with the pathology of denial is rather interesting as well. He's just excitable, an excitable boy. That refrain keeps chiming out like a cathedral bell. Rape and murder never sounded so carefree, I have to say. And this horror escalates, of course, from the discarded pot roast to the biting of the usher's leg in the theatre. We kind of know that this is not going to a good place. But this song is not just about a sort of pathological oddball. The subtext of it could be about our inability to recognise the pathology of psychosis. Alfred Hitchcock famously said that monsters are all around us, and he was certainly not wrong. And this tale of a young sociopath is just absolutely perfect, where Zevon's deadpan delivery strikes the perfect balance in this macabre, sardonic tale of dysfunction and denial. Roland the Headless Thompson gunner. Zevon sings about a mercenary who fights in the Congo wars, with their fingers on their triggers, knee-deep in gore, he sings. It's all about political double-dealing and spawns this ghostly revenge narrative. Roland, of course, is killed by his friend Van Owen, who blows his head off. And the Thompson gunner still wanders through the night after that, haunting the world and symbolising not only the ugliness of genocide, the African genocide, which provides the platform for this number, but a commentary on the ugliness of war and those that seek to profit by it. This song, like a few of the songs on this album, employs some really interesting folk modalities. One can almost imagine Fairport singing this one, with its tone of revenge and death, all set to that persistent tattoo of the drums. Accidentally Like a Martyr compares being dumped with being crucified. It's obviously quite a poignant simile. It reminds me a little bit of the Nick Cave song where he compares the man going to the electric chair as one going to confession. This song is tear-inducingly beautiful, and the sun refused to shine, he sings. He deals with the pain of romance and equates it with the naivety of divine worship. We get beautiful lines like, we made mad love, shadow love, random love and abandoned love, accidentally like a martyr. The hurt gets worse as the heart gets harder. The very nature of devotion is being critiqued here. Nighttime in the switching yard. Zevon sings in this one that the midnight train goes both ways. I have to wonder what he's talking about here, but or it could just be, as one critic has actually pointed out, a reference to Gladys Knight and the Pips taking that one-way midnight train to Georgia. At least Zevon is reassuring us that the train does at least go both ways here. This one definitely has something of the Nile Rodgers to it. Vera Cruz is a heartbreaking ballad that touches upon the plight of the refugee, as well as the backdrop of American imperialism. It starts off with what sounds like pipes, has an almost Simon and Garfunkel feel to it. That's another song that employs those distinctive folk intonations to the voice and the chord progressions. But it's historical violence that very much establishes the mood for this one. He sings at one point, I heard Woodrow Wilson's guns, I heard Maria crying. Late last night I heard the news that Vera Cruz was dying. This, of course, is very much about the American occupation of Vera Cruz and one of the ugliest moments during the Mexican Revolution. Tenderness on the Block is about a young girl growing up full of promise and potential, set to the optimistic and bouncy piano. This song may seem uncharacteristically positive for Zevon, but it's a bittersweet number. It's a story told from the point of view of a parent watching their child go out into the world. It's very much about letting go and loss. Lawyers, Guns and Money is one of my favourite songs on this one. It does not remind me of Albert Hammond's The Free Electric Band for some reason. But it tells the story of a hapless young rogue who gets on the wrong side of the Russian mafia, as I've said, which is definitely not healthy. It's a song about comeuppance, and Zevon composes these sort of numbers so well. I must admit, overall, I've not only loved this song, I've thoroughly enjoyed this album. I must check out some of his other work. This is the only album of his I actually know. I've heard some of the songs from the first album, which I've checked out on YouTube. But as I've said, he's an artist that left us way too soon. There's a quote attributed to one of the famous Greek philosophers that says, art is long and life is short, which unfortunately tragically applies when we think of Warren Zevon. I think overall the message left here is we have to wind down that window and enjoy the music. Enjoy every sandwich, of course. Anyway, you've been watching a Patreon exclusive classic album review looking at Warren Zevon's Excitable Boy. Did I say that correctly? Excitable Boy, sorry. It's a wonderful album that I've really enjoyed delving into. Anyway, I'll just say thank you so much for watching and supporting me. And I hope you're all staying warm, staying safe, but more importantly that you keep listening.